Hi, I'm Winter, and in this video I'm going to show you how I use Minecraft as a digital art program. Instead of just showing a time lapse, I want to explain what I'm actually thinking while I build. Not just what tools I use, but why I use them and how I make my decisions. I've always been interested in traditional art, things like value, composition, color theory, and proportions. When I started experimenting with Minecraft in this way, I realized that the game is basically a 3D pixel canvas. Every block functions like a pixel and every chunk can function like a grid square. So instead of using paint or digital brush, I use blocks. Instead of layers in a drawing program, I build physical layers on top of each other. The tools are different, but the artistic principles are exactly the same. Minecraft isn't doing the art for me, it's just a service I'm working on, similar to how others might draw in Procreate or Photoshop. The first thing I always do is I set up a grid system. I use the grid method, which is something a lot of traditional artists use when transferring a reference image onto a larger canvas. I divide my reference image into equal squares, and then I recreate the same squares in Minecraft. For me, one square on the reference image equals one chunk in Minecraft. That makes scaling consistent and predictable, and it prevents proportions from slowly drifting out of place. You don't see it in the time-lapse, but during the entire sketching process I have chunk borders turned on. Those borders act like my guidelines. Without them it would be very easy for features to shift slightly or for the image to stretch over time. The grid helps me keep my drawing accurate. Once the grid is in place, I begin sketching the image inside Minecraft. This part might look simple in the time-lapse, but it's actually very slow and very intentional. I'm constantly comparing the build to the reference image. I check proportions, angles, curves and spacing over and over again. At the same time, I start building something else in the background, a value plan. During the sketching phase, I create a list of blocks that correspond to different value levels in the image. I organize this list from the darkest part of the reference to the lightest highlight. This step is extremely important because value matters more than color. If the values are wrong, the image won't read correctly, even if the colors are technically accurate. So I carefully look at the reference and ask myself, where's the absolute darkest point and where's the brightest point? Everything else needs to sit somewhere between those two extremes. When I stop replacing the sketch with color, I don't delete the sketch underneath. Instead, I build the color directly on top of it. That way, if I need to double check a line or a shape, the original guide is still there. It's similar to working with layers in digital art. You keep your base sketch safe while developing the final version above. This gives me flexibility and it makes correcting mistakes much easier. One of the biggest limitations in Minecraft is the restricted color palette. Very often the exact color I need simply doesn't exist in a single block. In that case, I stack stained glass blocks on top of each other to create blended colors. The vanilla properties of stained glass allow for mixing of colors and creating slightly darker values within one color. This allows me to create shades that technically aren't available in the game. I didn't come up with this technique myself. I was inspired by Bismuthief and their use of glass in builds. I just adapted the idea to fit my workflow. Creating these colors involves a lot of trial and error. I might test different glass combinations and swap out base blocks underneath multiple times before I'm satisfied. Even a small change in the bottom block can completely shift the warmth or depth of a color. This process is all about experimentation. To make sure I'm aiming for the right tones, I use the color drop tool in Procreate. I sample colors directly from the reference image and look at the hue, saturation and brightness values. I then use the color wheel available with Axiom to choose my base block. From there, I lay a stained glass, gradually building up the tones until the color matches the reference as closely as possible. This helps me see what the color actually is rather than what I think it is. For example, something might appear black at first, but when I sample it, it turns out to be a very dark blue. If I build that area using pure black blocks, it ends up looking flat and lifeless. But if I recreate the dark blue tones using glass and layering, the area feels more natural and cohesive. Surrounding colors can trick your eyes, so checking the actual values keeps me grounded. At one point in this build, I realized that my darkest area was not actually dark enough compared to the reference image. The overall piece felt slightly washed out. Unfortunately, I had closed the game earlier, which meant that I couldn't easily undo the previous replacement with WordEdit, so I had to manually correct certain areas block by block. It was frustrating, but it also taught me something important. This was only my fourth drawing in Minecraft, and I learned that I shouldn't close the game until I'm completely confident in my value replacements. Mistakes like this are part of the learning process. At this stage of the build, I was still using the extract tool from Axiom. Later on, I found a combination of WorldEdit commands that make replacing blocks much faster. These commands help me speed up my process, but it's important to know that the artistic decision always happens before the command is used. Later on, I felt that the drawing wasn't detailed enough. It looked correct from far away, but up close it lacked subtle transitions. So I went back to my value list and introduced more mid-tones and smoother shifts between light and shadow. Detail isn't about randomly adding blocks, it's about carefully placing intermediate values to create smoother gradients. That refinement stage takes time, but it makes a huge difference. From this build, I learned a few things. First, it's important to make axiom blueprints of in-between stages so you can revert if something goes wrong. Second, palette test squares should be larger than you think, because colors behave differently at scale. And most importantly, value control is everything. If your values are correct, the image works, even without perfect color. At this point you may wonder, why not draw in Procreate or Photoshop? That's what the majority of the people do. It's because I've been playing Minecraft for over 10 years, and after that long I wanted to challenge myself in a new way. I started asking how far could I push the game if I treated it like a digital art program instead of just a building game. How much detail could I create? How accurate could I control color and value in a world made of cubes? For me, this process is about exploration. It's about taking something I've loved for years and seeing how far I can stretch it. Minecraft is just a medium. The challenge is seeing what's possible within. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next build.